Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. We've probably talked about this at some point in the past, but it's been a while. So for today's video, we're going to talk about the rail system that goes around the battleship. This rail system is specifically in the magazine spaces. However, to access those magazines, it does run all the way down Broadway, which means it can be used for equipment as well. And since it runs down Broadway for the equipment, it also runs up to the machine shop directly above that where the equipment can be repaired. There are a couple of different sized rails. These bigger ones that you see are rated for 1.5 tons. There's a smaller rail, actually part of it is in the overhead here, that's primarily associated with the powder magazines as opposed to shell handling, which is rated for only about 1 ton. Now, the thing that hangs people up the most is that hey, there are removable sections here. There are dead ends. Why do those exist? So the main reason for them is things like this watertight door here. We need the ship to be watertight way more often than we need to be moving powder and shells around the ship. You're just going to general quarters and setting condition zebra way more often than passing ammunition. So normally the missing pieces are struck down like this. So notice there is a slot in the bottom here that this projection piece can slide down into. It's also got a tab here that's important for later. And notice that at the top, there is this space that can be pinned in. When we put this in place, it's going to set up here. You'll notice that there is a pinhole on one side of the I-beam. There is not another hole on this side. So when you get your piece mounted here, it's got an overhang that'll hang there and take all the weight of it. It's got this notch here that'll sit into, and then you've got the pin that can go in and hold it in place. And you've got one of those on both ends. So that as you're moving something, potentially something that weighs nearly 1.5 tons over one of these rails, that it's not going to work its way free, especially on a ship that's moving, pitching, and rolling. So this brake is obviously for the door to be able to open and close. Why is there a brake here as well? Well, it's because there's a second rail above us. This rail is to get the powder down the loading hatch and onto so that you can bring it into the magazine. Once it's in the magazine, it isn't necessarily where it needs to be stacked up. So there's a second rail in the magazine that basically runs the perimeter of the room where the ammo is stored so that you can basically get it off of this rail and sling it onto that one instead, and then move it from there to where it needs to go. This rail continues all the way through the room because there are other magazines past this one. And also there's another powder loading hatch up here. So we can be feeding this from multiple hatches, or if that hatch is loading back there, we can be loading here. If this hatch is loading up there, we can be loading from back there. You've got all sorts of options. Part of why this rail is important is because during unrep, we're going to come alongside a ship and all of that stuff is going to be loaded to likely just one part of the ship, whether it's the bow or the stern. And then from there, we have to get it to where it needs to go. It is extremely hard to move a rolling cart down the main deck of the Iowa-class battleships. You can move it around the bow pretty easily, you can move it around the stern pretty easily, but getting it around the superstructure, there are some really tight areas where the ship's boats and the 5-inch guns cause you to make some tight turns, which is hard enough with a cart with a couple of gallons of paint on it. Ask me how I know. I can't imagine what it's like trying to move a 2,700-pound armor-piercing projectile on a 80-year-old dolly, or when the ship was last in service, on a 40-year-old dolly. The piece that actually goes on this sort of has some roller reels on it. Here's a picture of one that is on the tour route that you can see. And it's got a chain fall hanging off of it. And you can use that chain fall to hoist, lower, or hold in place any number of things. The chain fall has a hook on the end, and we can attach to that hook some of the special shell and powder handling paraphernalia. They're mostly like brackets like that with a piece that comes off the bottom like that to hold it in place. And then those tend to be able to pivot so that you can pick it up straight or lower it down a hatch straight and then pivot it on its side so it's easier to move. Like I said, these were installed primarily for the powder. They go to all of the powder and shell handling areas. It's for the projectiles in the powder. But to get it from the forward magazines to the aft magazines or vice versa, it has to go down Broadway. And so it's going directly over all of the engineering main spaces. So you can open up hatches specifically put in Broadway there for this purpose to lift equipment out, get it on the rail. You can use the chain fall to lower it all the way down those couple of stories to where it needs to go, or hoist it back up there, and then get it up to the machine shop. In addition to equipment and powder, we know of at least one occasion when they put a person on the rail. On Battleship New Jersey in 1969, we had a sailor in turret 3 named Andy Tobias who was crushed by a 16-inch projectile.
I was actually caught between the projectile hoist and some live round projectiles, and there was no way to get me out of that mechanism until a fellow that was my bunkmate, a big fella named Johnson out of Texas, came down physically and picked up a couple of the projectiles and moved them away so they could get me out of the predicament I was in. From there I was taken up to sick bay, and I was operated on for like a 9-hour stretch on board the ship out at sea by Dr. Denby and Dr. Quinn, who actually saved my life, and to them I am grateful.
They were able to get him in a Stokes basket, and they were able to manually pass him down vertical ladders and shell hoist trunks to get him down out of the turret and then back up to Broadway. And at that point, they've jostled the poor guy so much that he's in really, really bad condition. You try having a 16-inch shell sit on your lap and see how you'll feel in the morning. So they were able to rig up his Stokes basket onto the chain fall here and then push him from the aft end of Broadway all the way forward to sick bay. So I'm not aware of any other time that happened on Iowa-class battleships. I'm not aware of that being standard operating procedure, but it's one of those things that when you've got a group of motivated individuals on board, they find a way to make things work using the tools that they have. And this rail is one of the tools that was available to the crew of the battleship. They had to use it very frequently, and so they knew how it worked. And this rail is also a star. In the documentary Under Siege, Tommy Lee Jones goes down to Broadway and he has them cutting the rails apart so they can re-weld them on the missile decks to use them to pull the Tomahawks out of their armored box launchers and then crane them over to his captured North Korean submarine that's actually USS Drum. So odds are, if you knew about this rail, you're either a battleship sailor, you visited battleship museums, or you've seen the movie Under Siege. In contrast to this, the movie Battleship, which I still haven't seen, I'm told they walk down Broadway carrying a shell instead of using the rail that's right above their heads. And that's why Under Siege is the best battleship movie ever made. Which of those two movies do you prefer? Or do you have another favorite battleship movie? Sink the Bismarck's pretty good too, even though the models. But let us know in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the museum. Or if you're a filmmaker, come out and make a better battleship movie on board. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about us and the channel. Thanks for watching.